Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to dial in. Welcome back to another episode. I'm Colin O'Callahan,
I'm Ryan Curtin.
and we're back with another episode. Two down, two to go. We're in conference championship week. A divisional round has come and gone, and a lot of head coaching moves have taken place over the past week. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it with the bombshell of the entire week. Bills head coach Sean McDermott officially fired. And not only that, but general manager Brandon Beane was promoted to being the president of football operations. So definitely a lot of hand grabbing from Bills ownership here. But do you agree with what Buffalo did here?
No, I really don't. I think that getting rid of Sean McDermott was a bad idea. The fact that this team is really without much talent around Josh Allen, at least on the offensive side, they have James Cook. But apart from those two, really lacking. He's led that team to the playoffs each of the last, 5 or 6 years now. And it's even before Josh Allen. He was, or was he that? I don't even remember anymore. He's been
Yeah,
there for so long and he's had a lot of success with that team. So I think to get rid of him was not a hasty decision, but I don't think it was very well thought out. And I mean, we had that press conference afterwards, and that kind of made things even more confusing in a way.
Oh, yeah.
His arguments. At first, he said that he was fired because they lost the game, but then he said they lost the game because of the refs, and it was that whole meeting. This whole week has been sort of a nightmare for Bills fans, which I know is probably something that you want to see as a Patriots fan, but something that at
Uh,
least makes you happy for the future. But no, I mean, I think that, yeah, I think after all McDermott's done for this team, I know they haven't quite gotten over the hump, but I think that's more of a roster building issue. And so the fact that Brandon Beane's the one who gets promoted while McDermott is fired, I
yeah.
think I think they got it backwards, I guess.
Yeah, I will say this. With Sean McDermott being fired, no, I have no problem with it whatsoever. And here's the reason
Really.
why. It's like, yes, when he came in 2017, along with Brandon Beane, so you weren't off the mark
Mhm.
there. He was the one that turned things around and got them back into the playoffs for the first time in 20 plus years, with Tyrod Taylor and LaShawn McCoy as the centerpieces. Hell, Nathan Peterman actually started in that season. So that's how long it's been.
Mhm.
And, they had one setback in 2018, and then since then it's been playoff berth after playoff berth after playoff berth. Um, but then here's the thing. They get to the conference championship in 2020 against the Chiefs. They get outmatched. They lose by double digits. But we thought that, okay, they're going to have so many more chances to get back to that point, to beat this team and get to the Super Bowl. And since then, all they've experienced is playoff heartbreak and futility. So they were kind of in a situation this year where it's like, if you don't win it all this year, massive changes are going to be made. And obviously, just like the Baltimore Ravens, you kind of, when you have two generational quarterbacks that have MVPs and you haven't even gotten into the Super Bowl, you just have to realize, like, okay, something isn't working. You need a different voice in that locker room. So that part I have no problem with. The one thing I do have an issue with was the general manager promotion,
Mhm.
because I personally have a lot of respect for Brandon Beane, the work that he's done, the roster builds and whatnot. But at the same time, when Terry Pagula is in a press conference and pretty much throwing Keon Coleman under the bus for saying that, oh, the coaching staff really wanted him. Brandon Beane was just being a team player. That was the biggest issue I had, because if you look back at Brandon Beane's draft record, over the past like 5 or so years, maybe even shorter, they've only drafted like what, maybe 2, 3 Pro Bowlers since then, which is Ed
Mhm.
Oliver and James Cook. They've obviously had a lot of late round picks that have hit, obviously, like Terrell Bernard and Christian Benford and what have you. So the late round picks have been respectable. I'll give you that. But the first and second rounders have generally been hit or miss. And when you fire Sean McDermott, if you're not going to hold the front office accountable for a bunch of the roster shakeups, then obviously something is clearly missed. And that has to do with ownership, trying to, meddle and
Mhm.
get their paws into football affairs. And the reason why I'm so disappointed was because I thought this was all over. I mean, let me put it to you this way, Ryan. 2016, they fire Rex Ryan, and he's also Terry Pagula. He's also the owner of the Buffalo Sabres, the NHL team.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, he had been through 5 head coaches and 4 general managers, and he was becoming an even worse meddler than Jimmy Hasselman's been for the Cleveland Browns. And when they brought in Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, all of that died for the Bills because they let the football guys do their jobs, and what it's led to has been a good string of success. And now they're in a precarious situation where it's like you have the owner making these comments, defending the GM, throwing the coaching staff under the bus, letting it get leaked out to the media that you wanted him gone literally the minute the playoff game was over. And it's pretty much becoming like, on the surface, it should be one of the most attractive destinations on the map because you got Josh Allen. But when you have that type of situation in the front office, a lot of head coaches are thinking to themselves like, okay, how much free will or how much leeway am I going to have? So I don't think they're in the worst situation possible, but yeah, this is their process of finding a head coach. It's probably going to take a little longer than we think. So
Yeah, well, I just don't know who they're going to bring in that's going to be better than McDermott. I mean, I think that you have some good options out there, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like no option has had more success or has had more success than McDermott has, even though obviously they haven't gotten over that hump of the playoffs. But as I said earlier, I think, and as you mentioned too, it comes a lot to these poor draft choices. They've been trying in free agency. They signed Joey Bosa in the offseason, and he's been great this year for the Bills defense. But really, apart from that, they're not doing a whole lot to help Josh Allen and this Bills team get wins. And at the end of the day, they were just outmatched by the Broncos. I think that the defense made plays when they need to. They forced the 4 turnovers. Josh Allen couldn't do it all himself. And the defense, they got some good pieces, but they couldn't slow Bo Nix down. And Bo Nix really did impress me this weekend. We'll talk more about that later.
right.
But I think that I do think that this is more of a general management issue than it is a coaching issue. The coaches all really rallied around Sean McDermott, and they let it know that they were upset now that he's gone.
Yeah. One more point, and then we'll move on to the next segment. The Bills, not only they went all in to get, the splash players that they needed on both sides of the ball. They did that, in 2019. They did it in 2020 and 21, so forth. And then the next year, they decided to go with a new approach and say, you know what? We're going to have Josh Allen win more with less. They've literally used 2 different strategies, yet the results have been the same. So if you're going to fire the head coach, then you got to hold the management accountable. And unfortunately, that's the part where we agree, where it's like, okay, you can't just 2 + 2 is not adding up to 4. It's adding that it's only going to get worse if you don't get the right guy in charge. But we'll see what happens with Buffalo as the next 2 weeks progress. Let's talk about some guys that were able to get head coaching jobs. So Kevin Stefanski is now with the Atlanta Falcons. Robert Saleh signed a 5-year deal with the Tennessee Titans. Jeff Hafley, he agreed to a contract terms with the Miami Dolphins. And just yesterday, Jesse Minter, the former Chargers defensive coordinator, is now going to be the new head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. So sticking with the head coaches here, which one do you like the most here?
Well, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I was very sad to see Jesse Minter go. But I think as soon as I saw he was getting interviews at all these head coaching jobs, I was like, that guy's going to be an AFC North head coach. That guy has the mentality and sort of the mindset to be like this, smash mouth football, like very defensive focused football coach. And what he did with this Chargers defense before Harbaugh and Minter got there, they were one of the worst defenses in football. And for the last 2 years, they've quickly turned it around completely. They're now one of the best. And, both defenses have a lot of very talented players. And I can totally imagine seeing Jesse Minter work with Kyle Hamilton the same way they worked with Derwin James, just sort of putting him anywhere, having him rush, having him at corner, safety. I think the Ravens defense, they needed a defensive-minded head coach. That was, obviously a change of pace, just because, their offense, I think, is they have Lamar Jackson, and I think he's going to be able to will this offense to at least, a few winning games on his own. But the defense is really the issue. the defense was the issue. And I think, as I said, Jesse Minter fits in perfectly with that Ravens defense.
Yeah. I agree with everything that you said about Baltimore, about Jesse Minter. I think defensively, he's going to make sure that unit doesn't be one of the worst units in the league. I'm curious to see what the offense does, like who they bring in as their coordinator. If Todd Monken ends up going to the Giants to see like who's going to be the next play caller for Lamar Jackson. I saw one report that it might be Cliff Kingsbury or that Lamar might want him. So that could be pretty exciting. But obviously, I'm not going to speculate too much. Honestly, the one that I am going to say is like a close second is the Robert Saleh one to the Titans, because I think we all knew the minute that he got fired from the Jets, we all knew that he was going to get another head coaching opportunity at some point. I think him going back to the 49ers was the best thing that could have happened, because even with all the injuries that took place, him losing Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and Tanner Bethune, some key guys in the secondary as well. I mean, for him to be able to lead that sturdy of a unit, and obviously we all know what Kyle Shanahan is offensively and, the pieces they have on that side of the ball, but for the 49ers defense to still be, generally regarded as like a pretty solid unit with a lot of grit and with a lot of focus and with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears poured out on the field, you just knew that, there's going to be another team that's like, okay, we understand that what happened with the Jets wasn't entirely your fault. You got pretty much scapegoated because you had Aaron Rodgers. Let's see what you could do with, the pieces that you want and the guys that you would love to have in your locker room. And I think with the Tennessee Titans, that defense is going to be a way better unit. You got Jeffrey Simmons. You got some key guys on the second level that could really step up. I think Arden Key, one of their other pass rushers, he is a very, very underrated player. So I think Saleh could definitely scratch the surface of that. The one thing I will be cautious about, though, is how that offense looks. Who he's going to bring in as an offensive coordinator, what they're going to do to help Cam Ward out. Obviously, I think Saleh is going to attract a lot of free agents just because of his personality and the way he coaches defense, because he's one of the best defensive minds in the league. But offensively, if you don't help out your franchise quarterback, who just happens to be the #1 overall pick, and you just leave him out there to die like Brian Callahan did the year before, then I'm scared that we're probably going to get another few years of mediocrity, possibly even worse. And at this point, you just don't know if Saleh's head coaching material again. But I like that the Titans hired him, because if it wasn't him, it was probably going to be Matt Nagy, and it was just going to be the Kansas City Titans all over again. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that after the Jets gig went the way it did, like we talked about this last week, I think we both knew that Robert Saleh deserved to still be a head coach somewhere. And the fact that he got it so fast, that was the part that surprised me the most, but the way that he worked with that Niners defense after all the injuries they went through, Joey Bosa, Fred Warner, like that defense was completely decimated, but they made it to the divisional round. They played, they didn't have one of the best defenses in football, certainly, but the way that the defense rallied around him and made the big plays when it mattered, that was all they needed to do, obviously. And I think that, Saleh is going to be a great leader as a coach. And I think that, it's a good decision by the Titans to bring him in. I still think the Minter pick is better, but you're right. It certainly is a close second.
Yeah. It's funny. Like when you were talking about Jesse Minter, you pretty much said like the minute I saw that he was getting head coaching interviews, I just knew he was going to go to an AFC North team. I was thinking about that, and all I kept thinking was the Cleveland Browns are just the biggest losers out of the entire head coaching search, because nobody wants to go there. I mean, Jesse Minter said no. Chris Shula pretty much said, yeah, I don't want to go there. Mike McDaniel withdrew from the coaching search because he thought there were better opportunities out there. I mean, they're pretty much at the point where they're going to have to promote Jim Schwartz. And it's like, let me share this screen with you quick, because I literally was doing some research about it this morning. Let me pull it up. And I was thinking to myself, like, okay, how much trouble are the Browns going to be in this offseason? And sure enough, look at their cap situation. They're $18 million over the cap, and we all know why. It's because of this guy right here. And next year is when the contract becomes void, so they could pretty much cut him and not have to take on too much of these losses. But yeah, nearly $81 million, and you got a few more guys in there that are in 8-figure deals, including Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, who are definitely nearing their early 30s. So, yeah, if I'm a head coach for the Cleveland Browns, it's like, yeah, I don't really have a lot of control over the roster. And I think that's the biggest reason why they didn't fire Andrew Berry, because there isn't going to be another general manager that wants to take on that much dead cap. So, um, but going back to the head coaching moves, like, was there any one of them that you felt like somewhat hesitant about, that you were like, I don't know if this is going to be a good fit or not, but what do you think?
I mean, I guess sort of my first thought maybe was Kevin Stefanski to the Falcons, just because,
Mm-hmm.
the way that these last few seasons have gone for the Browns, I don't know. I don't know what you can see out of that to be like, oh, that's the guy that I want coaching my team.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, of the head coaching choices, there weren't any that struck me as like terribly bad, at least not this week. I think the move that surprised me the most in terms of coaching was Drew Petzig going to the Lions. That one was
Mm.
really one where I was like, okay, I've seen like what the Lions have said, like he's a better fit in Detroit than he was in Arizona. He's, more of a run focused guy. Obviously, the Lions have Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, one of the best running offenses in football. But I don't see what I said about Kevin Stefanski. I don't know what you see out of the Browns team the last few years that's appealing to the Falcons. I don't know
Mm.
what you see in this Cardinals offense over the last few years that appeals to the Lions.
I
I think
know.
that, like, I mean, their passing game looked good, but at the end of it, like, it wasn't it wasn't going to win them games. Like, it was never good enough to where it was like, wow, this Cardinals offense is really good. And I think they were underutilizing Marvin Harrison. Obviously, they got unlucky in the run game with the injuries to Connor, and they had a few other guys that were sort of back and forth on the injury report all year. But I don't know. It's definitely going to be a downgrade, certainly from Ben Johnson. But I think it's going to be sort of the same woes we saw this year, where they're just not quite the same as they were.
Yeah. Uh, I definitely agree with you about the Drew Petzing one, because, I mean, let me put it to you this way. What last year, with Jacoby Brissett taking over, like, at the halfway point of the season, he was sacked like one of the top 10 most quarterback. He was like one of the top 10 most sacked quarterbacks in the National Football League. And what was Detroit's biggest issue with their O-line last year? Pass protection. And I
Mhm.
understand that the interior dealt with a lot of injuries, but I just feel like you didn't really, like you said, it's not really much of an upgrade, and it's not the worst downgrade, but I just don't really think you got better on that front.
Mhm.
Um, with Stefanski, I think, like, it's funny. It's like, you look at the last few years in Cleveland, and the results have been absolutely abysmal. And obviously, a lot of it is due to a lack of talent, but also because that offense just never was able to excel the way it has. I think when he's in Atlanta, it's pretty much, you're getting the exact opposite, where you
Mhm.
have a decent quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. You've got easily one of the top 3 running backs in football in Bijan Robinson. You've got Drake London. You got Kyle Pitts, and you've got one of the best offensive lines in the league. So I think with the right amount of guys, and as long as they're fully healthy, you could say to yourself, all right, I think Kevin Stefanski might, lead this offense in the right direction. But the one caveat to that is, with Zach Robinson as your offensive coordinator last year, who's now with the Tampa Bay Bucks, they were one of the lowest scoring offenses in all of football. And when you have that
Mhm.
much talent, and when you have that much, firepower at your disposal, it's unacceptable. So Stefanski definitely has a lot of cleaning up to do. When we talk about the assistants, I think, like, one of them, there's actually two that I thought, you know, were ones that kind of blew my mind a little bit. The first was Mike McDaniel going to the
Mhm.
Chargers to be the new
Yeah.
offensive coordinator. And then staying in the AFC West, Eric Bieniemy's going back to Kansas City to
Mhm.
be the offensive coordinator, which is like, that. The minute I saw that Matt Nagy was most likely going to leave, I'm just like, yeah, they're probably going to bring Bieniemy back, just to pretty much just to keep Mahomes happy and to keep
Yeah.
Andy Reid, into it. But I want to hear your thoughts on the McDaniel hire, because he's still in a couple of head coaching searches. So if he ends up staying in LA, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's a great fit. I mean, what he's been able to do with that offense, especially in Miami, like that offense, they scored 70 points just a couple years ago. And while things didn't go the way that the Dolphins wanted this year, like he's still one of the most brilliant offensive minds in all of football. And I
Right.
think him coming to LA with this really young Chargers core, Justin Herbert, he's, in his late 20s now, but he's still got a lot of talent. Their offensive line should be healthy, but I'm really excited to see what he does with this run game, because last year with Greg Roman, it was very stale. It was
Yep.
very predictable, what kind of runs they were going to do, just sort of hammer it down the middle. And with that offensive line, that was never going to work. And, we saw what Achane's been able to do these last couple years under Mike McDaniel and how he's really thrived in that environment. And I think that we can see the same thing with Omari and Hampton in the next couple years. And, I have a lot of faith in the pass game, obviously, with Herbert and that young receiving core, but I think McDaniel can only make it better. And with these, these schemes that he's running, finding ways to get those guys open. And, I think especially if they can get like a true wide receiver one on that team, then it's going to be really hard to stop that offense. And if they can stay healthy, that's the biggest thing, knowing this Chargers team. But I think he's going to be a great fit.
Yeah. Honestly, I was just going to defer to you on that one, but I think one more hire that I think, definitely doesn't get a lot of credit. Christian Parker, the new defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. So last year, he was the passing game coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was really one of the key guys to develop Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who are obviously all-pro caliber corners. And I think he's definitely going to be a tremendous fit for the Dallas Cowboys because they went younger. They went more modern. They didn't go for a retread like they did with Matt Eberflus or Mike Zimmer. They went with someone that, can definitely bring the best out of their secondary. And one of the biggest problems that Dallas's defense had was their ability to stop the pass. So I feel like if they could get better improving that secondary in free agency, well, really in the draft, because we all know in free agency, the Dallas Cowboys pretty much just do next to nothing, except for like
they make it worse. They make their team worse in the free agency.
They make it worse, and all they do is just offer like some of their lower end players just hometown discounts. But the point is, I feel like with Parker, if you already have Quentin Williams, you have like a few guys that you can like really build this defense around. The minute you add like more girth and add more, oomph to not just your secondary, but to your D-line, because they did not have quite as much the pass rush without Micah Parsons, then I think Parker could definitely get this defense back on the right track. But enough with head coaches. Let's talk about the playoffs. So we obviously started off the show with the Buffalo Bills coming up short in the playoffs once again, losing to the Denver Broncos, the number 1 seed, on the road, 33-30 in overtime. What an absolute shocker. And I'm saying that sarcastically. But I'll ask you the question. What was the biggest reason the Bills lost?
I mean, it had to have been the turnovers, especially like looking back at the game. They had the turnover at the end of the first half, a really ridiculous looking seeming turnover on that play. Like why even try lateraling in that situation? Like I can't even fathom that one. But I mean, 4 turnovers or 5 turnovers, actually.
5 turnovers.
Yeah, 5 turnovers. That's not going to win you any football games, no matter how good your quarterback is, how good your running game is. I mean, those 3 points at the end of the first half, that was the difference in that game, and I think that if they played smarter football, didn't turn the ball over, they would have won. But another thing, I sort of brought this up earlier as well. I was really, really impressed with Bo Nix. I've sort of been, I've not been a Bo lever. And I'm interested to see how they do next week without him. I think if the Broncos give the Patriots a run, then we can sort of be like, okay, maybe Bo Nix isn't necessarily the reason that this team is good, but he played a pretty sound game of football. He only had 1 turnover, if I'm not mistaken, or did he have no turnovers?
He had 1.
So he had 1. Okay. He played a really sound game of football, made some smart reads. Obviously that passing game, it suits him well with these little underneath passes, but with Sean Payton drawing up plays, it works. And, I think that the Bills weren't able to slow him down. They weren't able to figure that offense out. And, the turnovers got him a few extra points as well. And that was really all they needed.
Yeah. If you ask the member of Bills Mafia what the biggest reason why they lost was, they'll say the officials, because all they're going to point to is that final interception where It looks like Brandon Cooks is going to come down with a huge completion. They're going to get the walk-off field goal, but Jaquan McMillan ripped it out of Cooks' hands at the very last second. It is a ticky-tack call because in a situation like that, normally it goes to the offensive player if the receiver has full possession, but it didn't look like Cooks completely had it the entire way. If it was a little closer to his chest, I would have been like, okay, yeah, they kind of did get screwed. But there does come a point in time where you say to yourself, they should never have even been in this situation in the first place. I'm talking about the
Exactly.
Bills. If you told me that the Bills offense wasn't going to punt the entire game and that they were going to score 30 points, I would have said this is a blowout. Like the Broncos just have no chance against them. And it just was not the case because the first turnover, the Buffalo Bills, right before then, Josh Allen stepped up the middle and he took off for a 27-yard run and he got all the way inside the Denver 30-yard line. They're going to completely seize momentum of that game. They're up 7-3 at that point. They're going to go up by double digits if they score a touchdown. And James Cook coughs up the ball, and it's exactly the break the Denver Broncos needed because the offense capitalized by scoring a touchdown. Then the field goal happened, so the game is tied. Then Bo Nix throws a perfect dart to Lil Jordan at Humphrey to get the lead again. And then the lateral happened, or the attempted lateral.
I don't even know. I don't even know if you can call that a lateral.
It was, I don't know what the hell he was trying to do in that situation, but you pretty much just gifted the Broncos 3 extra points. And then on the second play of the third quarter, you get strip sacked, and now you're down by 13. And I honestly thought to myself, like, okay, if the Bills defense was able to force a field goal off of that, you know that they can easily get back into this game because up until the final drive of the fourth quarter, I think Denver's offense had like 32 yards. And sure enough, Buffalo, they got right back in the game. They took the lead and they had a chance to go up by 8 points, but they were forced to kick a field goal with like 3-4 minutes left. And to your point about Bo Nix, was he perfect? Absolutely not. But just like he had done a lot of times throughout the season, when it was time to deliver the win, when it was time to close the deal, and when it's time to show up in the clutch, he did that. And he threw an absolute perfect spiral to Marvin Mims. And I thought he was going to blow out his back just because of how he was holding it towards the end. I got a little scared for a second, but that got them the lead. And then Buffalo ended up tying the game. And then in overtime, obviously we know what happened there. We had the punt, then the interception, then the 2 horrific pass interference penalties that Buffalo was flagged on. And I know people want to say, oh, that wasn't PI on the first one. Well, you were going to get an automatic first down anyways because Joey Bosa delivered a late hit. And then Tre'Davious White pretty much rage quit the stream, and Will Lutz got the chip shot field goal that they needed. So, yes, turnovers were the biggest reason why they won. But once again, in a must-win game with the season on the line, the Bills defense once again collapsed. And I think the biggest shock of all of this was not about Sean McDermott getting fired, but it was because that Bo Nix, apparently on the second to last play of overtime, broke a bone in his ankle. And he's going to be out for the rest of the playoffs. And that is a huge, huge loss.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, we'll see how much this Broncos defense can help them out. And it was kind of the same thing we saw in the Patriots game. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But how good is this defense, and can they make up for quarterback play? And I think if the defense of the Broncos can step up and deliver the win, then obviously credit to them. And maybe Bo Nix isn't as good as he looked in that game. I'm overreacting a little bit here. I think he's still, made some huge throws in that game, certainly. But, again, we'll talk more about the AFC Championship game later. But
we
will.
will.
Certainly was. I do think it was a huge blow to this Broncos, and I don't think they're going to quite be the same. Even if Jared Stidham, talent-wise, is good, just sort of not playing all year, and even last year as well. Like, that's really going to hurt this Broncos going into this AFC Championship game.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into that. But for now, let's talk about the next matchup that happened on Saturday night. This one wasn't so close. The Seattle Seahawks absolutely smashed the 49ers 41-6. Literally less than 15 seconds in, and Rashid Shaheed is going the distance 95 yards to the house for a kickoff return touchdown, and the game just got completely worse from there. But the one silver lining, the 49ers scored 3 more points than they did 2 weeks before against Seattle. But Yeah, I don't even know what to say to this one. What's your biggest takeaway, I guess?
Yeah, I mean the Seahawks are legit. I think going into the playoffs and going into the game this past weekend, I mentioned it on the show. I don't know if I trust Sam Darnold,
Yeah.
but this game they didn't really even need to rely on Sam Darnold. I think he was smart with the football. He didn't make any mistakes. And in a game where the defense played as well as they did, they got that early touchdown. All momentum was in their court as soon as the game started. Sam Darnold did what he needed to do in this game. The run offense was great, as they have been all year, and the defense also has been great all year. They stepped up today, and while they
Hmm.
doubled the points allowed to the Niners this last week, certainly it did not matter in a game where you're causing earthquakes literally on the first play of the game.
I know. Um, yeah, I thought this was going to be a closer game. I thought, okay, Sam Darnold's dealing with an oblique injury. The 49ers, they're coming off an impressive road win over the Eagles. I thought, okay, this is going to be a very chippy game. And yeah, it was absolutely not that. And more importantly, I mean, think about it this way. They lose Zach Charbonnet earlier in that game due to a torn ACL.
Mm-hmm.
Devastating loss. But they had the 49ers defense, they just eventually we all knew the injuries were going to catch up to them. And they had no answers for Kenneth Walker at all. 19
Mm-hmm.
carries, like 115 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. Pretty much like towards the second half, the Seahawks pretty much just said, okay, we don't even really need to throw the football. Sam Darnold had a pretty decent game. He was
Mm-hmm.
efficient. He didn't turn the ball over. But they pretty much just said, all right, we don't really even need to throw the ball in the second half. Let's just run it down their throats. And the 49ers just had no answers for that. But offensively, it was as depressing of a performance as I've seen from them all year long. I mean, Christian McCaffrey went nowhere, and he ended up suffering a stinger that kept him very
Mm-hmm.
limited. Jake Tonches, he pretty much blew that game wide open with a lost fumble. They were bad on third down. They were bad on fourth. Brock Purdy turned the ball over a couple times. And I mean, there was like a point in time where I thought, okay, maybe it could be maybe they could try to get back in this game, but the Seahawks just showed no mercy. And they proved they were legit. And now they have a even bigger, tougher test on their hands this
Mm-hmm.
coming Sunday at home. But I think we'll preview that in just a few minutes. Let's talk about Sunday's festivities, starting with the New England Patriots getting a win over the Houston Texans, 28-16. I wonder who could have guessed that. Certainly not me, but
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah, I
it
did. I
was.
certainly guessed it. I'm sure you remember, right, guys? Right, everybody?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this was a whirlwind of a game. It was sloppy, it was snowy. There were a bunch of turnovers, but at the end of the day, the Patriots offense showed up better and you know, they came through a lot better than the Houston Texans did. So, I'll ask you this. What do you think the biggest reason was for the Patriots victory?
I mean, I think there are two. I think first and foremost, it was the defense. Once again, they've been continuing this great run in the playoffs. They shut down the Chargers a couple weeks ago. Last week, they pretty much shut down anything CJ Stroud tried to do. Obviously, they
Yep.
gave up more points, but CJ Stroud, 4 interceptions, run game couldn't get anything going at all.
Mhm.
And, obviously when your run and your pass offense isn't working, then what can you do, right? And the other reason is I think Drake May made the throws when it mattered. It was very much like what I was saying about Bo Nix. He didn't play a flawless game, certainly, but he made the big throws when it mattered. He had that late touchdown to Kayshon Boutte. Great grab, by the way. Maybe certainly one of the catches of the year,
Hell yeah.
maybe the catch of the year. Um, and yeah, I mean, he had a 4 fumbles, was able to get 2 of them back, but obviously turned it over twice. But again, I think he did what he needed to do, especially with the way that the Texans offense was playing. He didn't need to do too much, and it was dicey, as you mentioned. It was a very sloppy game, but at the end of the day, like, he led that drive to get the game-winning touchdown. The run offense really stepped up in the fourth quarter to ice the game, and that was all they needed to do.
Yep. I appreciate you bringing up the Drake May point, but I'm going to get to that in just a second. For a good stretch of this game, I was actually more angry through a lot of it, which was saying a lot considering that the Patriots were up 21-10 at one point, and then they were only up by 5, with plenty of time left in the fourth. I knew that CJ Stroud was absolutely horrific. He was the biggest reason why the Texans lost. He threw 4 interceptions, one of them a pick 6 that pretty much allowed New England to just steal the entire momentum throughout the rest of the afternoon, which was kind of expected because they were at home. And when you play in Foxborough in snowy weather, you're not supposed to lose, no matter who the heck you're going up against. So the defense played absolutely incredible. And, there were so many big plays that they made at the best possible moments. So I'm not going to, shortchange that. But the reason why I say I was so frustrated was because this offense has definitely not been the best over the last 2 weeks. They have now given up 10 sacks and they've turned the ball over 5 times. I'm going to say it again. 10 sacks allowed, 5 turnovers. And they've won both games. And I think the biggest reason why they were able to get to this one is, to your point, they had 3 big scoring drives in that game that literally allowed them to, pull forward and, not lose any momentum. The first was the 4th down play on the second drive of the game. 4th and 1, they go for it. The Texans bring the blitz. May throws a perfect strike over the middle to Demario Douglas, and they go up 7-0. The second one, this is near the end of the second quarter. This was a couple of drives after the pick 6. I think this was the drive, the offense that they had on the field once they got back on the field after the pick 6. So
end of the first half. Yeah.
Yep. So they Drake May fires a couple of big completions to Kayshon Boutte. They're already inside the 10-yard line. And on 1st and goal at the 7, May fires another bullet, this time to Stephon Diggs for a 7-yard touchdown, and they go up by 11 at the half. And the final one was the Kayshon Boutte throw, or the Kayshon Boutte catch. And it was kind of similar to what I saw last year when the Patriots played the Texans in Drake May's first ever start. Simple go route for Kayshon Boutte, going up against Houston's top corner, Derek Stingley Jr. And the catch was different, obviously, but that play right there kind of made everything feel better. And the minute I saw that the Patriots were going to get a touchdown on that play, I'm like, yeah, there's no way in hell the Texans are going to come back in this game, because they couldn't run the football. Woody Marks got completely shut down. CJ Stroud got sacked a few times. Obviously, the turnovers were what they were. And he was already going through a lot of trial by fire already. He didn't have Nico Collins. He ended up losing Dalton Schultz early in that game to a calf injury. They didn't have Joe Mixon all season. The O-line, they didn't have Trent Brown, their starting right tackle. So there were definitely a lot of growing pains that this Houston offense already had to go through. But New England's offense, they were just a little bit better. And that was all they needed. And that's why they're back in the AFC Championship, which is absolutely... Oh my gosh. You know what? In the interest of full disclosure, both of us are going to be in Santa Clara in a couple of weeks because we're going to cover the Super Bowl. If the Patriots win on Sunday, it's going to be a dream come true for me. And I know everybody, 90% of the people in our class are going to be pissed to hell because nobody wants to see them. They'd rather see the Bears. But you know what? I don't freaking care. It's going to be absolutely fantastic.
Maybe not for everybody, like you said, but I'm glad you get to enjoy it.
Yeah, and we got to play Jarrett Stidham, the guy that we ended up drafting in 2019, and we'll get into it in a few minutes. But I don't think it's going to be the proverbial blowout that some people think it should be. But before we do that, speaking of the Bears, let's get to the final game on our docket. The Los Angeles Rams, they beat the Chicago Bears in overtime, 20-17. And unfortunately, the year of destiny for the Bears is officially over. It's unfortunate and it's a bummer, but I don't think anybody wanted that year to end. They just wanted to join the ride for as long as possible. Honestly, who could blame them? But I think in the back of our minds, we kind of knew that the luck was going to run out. And if it was most likely going to be against this team. But I'll ask you the question. How do you assess what happened? Like, what do you think the biggest reason was for the Bears' defeat?
Well, it got late in the Vatican and the Pope had to go to bed, so he couldn't pray anymore. No, I think, Caleb Williams had, and I said this at the time, I think Caleb Williams is sort of what the Colts thought Anthony Richardson was going to be. He was making throws that only he could make. That fourth down throw was, I didn't know how he could
It
top the
was
throw he made the
so
week
bad.
before, but he
Yeah.
managed to do it. And he threw, he got the touchdown. And
Oh, the
yeah,
touchdown. Okay.
yeah, I'm talking about the touchdown. Right.
Okay.
And I was
Gotcha.
like, oh my gosh, they're going to do it again.
Yep.
How is this possible? But no, he also had the 3 turnovers. And I think that was obviously sort of like what we talked about with the Bills. Like that was one of the things that cost them the game. Like you can't turn the ball over that many times. Same with the Texans. Like a lot of turnover woes this weekend, and all of those teams lost the game because you can't win by having 3, 4, or 5 turnovers. And
Yeah.
the Rams weren't able to take advantage of them as much as I thought they would. They only ended up scoring 17 in regulation. Obviously got the field goal in overtime. But yeah, the Bears were in it. The defense gave them a chance. They played really sound football on that side of the ball, slowed down Stafford, Kyron, Puka, that whole, entourage on offense. But at the end of the day, like they made too many bad decisions to not go for points on fourth down. And Caleb Williams had one too many turnovers. And that was ultimately why they couldn't quite pull it out.
Yeah. The Bears just left way too many points off the board. First drive of the game, it's 4th and 2. Field goal will give you the lead, and instead you throw a horrific interception that's way behind the intended target. And the Rams offense capitalized by scoring a touchdown. And then the second pick happened, in a drive where, you were definitely destined to get a few points and take the lead, but nothing really happened afterward. And then the third interception was the backbreaking one. You have a chance to win. It's overtime. Your defense takes the field to start the extra period. They force the 3 and out. Your offense has a chance to go win the game again. And then that pick was exactly what the Rams needed. And, that's why they're on to the NFC Championship. And it's not even just that. The drive before the miraculous touchdown of Cole Kmet, think about it this way. You kick a field goal, that touchdown to Kmet, that gets you the lead.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows? Like, I'm not going to say that, the Rams wouldn't have been able to tie the game at that point, but the odds of winning would have been better. So, yeah, Chicago Ben Johnson, he channeled his inner Dan Campbell, and it ended up biting him in the butt. But I'm going to focus more on the Rams for a second. Simply put, they just made the least amount of mistakes, and there were definitely a lot of times where, they looked sluggish. Their offensive line had a hard time protecting Matthew Stafford. They couldn't really identify where the blitzes were coming from on certain occasions. But first of all, they scored the points that they needed to off of a couple of those turnovers. And more importantly, when they did get those opportunities to seal the deal, they had so many big-time third down conversions and fourth down plays that, really kept that offense, in the right amount of spirits. Matthew Stafford, he definitely felt like it wasn't his best game. Same with Sean McVay. But, when you give that team that much breathing room, with the turnovers and the fourth down stops and everything in between, you just have to, you can't, there's no room for error in that situation. And I think for the Rams, for them to, take advantage of it the way they did, they were the better team. And, unfortunately, it was just not meant to be in the Windy City. And I think that's why we have the horrific weather that we have right now, because of that freaking deflating loss. So
yeah.
yep.
By the way, for people that aren't in Chicago, it's -30 with wind chill. So we mentioned it was cold last weekend. It's about 30 degrees colder this week.
Yep. All our classes literally had to be moved online because there's no way in hell you take one step outside and you're probably getting frostbite. So that's just to put that in perspective. But anyways, I digress. Let's get to the nitty-gritty here. We got to make our conference championship picks. Let's start with the AFC, the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. Take your pick.
Yeah, I know I've, kind of been fading the Patriots the last couple weeks, and I don't know if this is something you want to hear now, but I'm going to pick the Patriots to win. I think that losing Bo Nix, as I mentioned, we'll see how well this defense does against Drake May and that offense that hasn't necessarily quite looked like themselves this playoff run, but I do think that losing your starting quarterback this late in the season, it's gonna hurt this offense no matter what. And I do think that Patriots defense has really stepped up. They've been playing some great football. I think that the Broncos offense will get on the board, certainly, but it's going to be very difficult for them to score. And I think that Drake May, as he's done all playoffs, all season, he'll make the big plays when it counts. And ultimately, it'll be very low scoring, but I think the Patriots will win it like maybe 20-10. That's my
Okay.
prediction. It's going to be very low scoring, but I do think Pats will win.
All right. So I'm actually going to paint a little bit of a picture here because over
Yeah,
the
go
last
for
day
it.
or two, over the last day or two, there's been a lot of trash talk between the two teams.
Mm,
Sean Payton came out in a press conference and said that their fans are going to have plenty of rest, after Sunday, because if they win on Sunday, then they get 2 weeks off before they get to go to Santa Clara, or so they think. Then
hmm
Keyshawn Booty clapped back and said, you'll have plenty of time to rest in Cancun or something like that. I'm paraphrasing because I don't know the exact quote, but it's somewhere around the block. But with the game itself, you got Jarrett Stidham, a former fourth-round pick of the New England Patriots, coming into the AFC Championship in his first start since 2023, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken,
I
when he
think
was with
that's
the Raiders.
right.
2023 or 2022, whatever the year was. Um, so yeah, he's taking over a well-coached offense. Sean Payton is still one of the best head coaches in the game, and you're assisted by a defense that by far leads the league in sacks and can play pretty explosive on all three levels. You've got Nick Bonito and Zach Allen and Jonathan Cooper, Patrick Surtain, Jaquan McMillan, and the list goes on and on and on. So the Denver Broncos are definitely channeling their 2015 version where they, were able to take a pretty okay offense, but an elite defense and win a Super Bowl. And you have to go through the New England Patriots to get that done. And ironically, the last place they won the Super Bowl, Levi Stadium. So they're thinking it's going to be another situation 10 years later. But the New England Patriots right now, I'm going to just pretty much copy what Stephen A. Smith said. You better not freaking lose this game, okay?
Hmm
Because that defense has been absolutely prolific over the last 2 weeks. Yet offensively, you would just hope that things get better, that you wouldn't turn the ball over as many times, that Drake May has enough time in the pocket, especially this week when he's got to go up against that front four. You better make sure that somebody gets open or that they have a couple big plays here and there because I hate to say it, it's probably going to be like that 2015 AFC Championship if they don't adjust the protections and if they don't make sure they identify where the pressure's coming from. Because I understand that DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller are no longer on the team, and it's been like 10, 11 plus years since that happened. But these guys are pretty damn good, and you don't want to have Drake May get completely beat up in the biggest game of the season before the Super Bowl.
hmm
But with that being said, I think we all know who I'm going with. I don't think that really needs to be up for discussion, but I don't think
The
it's going to
Broncos,
be.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm
I don't think this. I don't think this is going to be the blowout that a lot of people would think it would be, or that should be. I think we're going to get a very close game here because, like I said, Sean Payton does a tremendous job coaching that offensive side of the ball, and I think with J.K. Dobbins potentially coming back from IR, I
Mm.
think it could somewhat give the running game a boost because last week it didn't do too badly with RJ Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin. They were able to have a somewhat good amount of success, which is I was honestly shocked with. I didn't think they would. Um, and defensively, we all know what they're capable of. But at the end of the day, I think I trust Drake May a lot more. I think Mike Vrabel is definitely going to, have a few clapback comments to say once they beat Sean Payton, if that's the case. And more importantly, I've liked the way this defense has played all playoffs long, and I think that's just going to be the difference. So I'll say that the Patriots win this game 26-20.
Yeah, it's
26 to
definitely a
20.
safe. Yeah, definitely a safe pick to say the Patriots are going to win. But you're right. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, certainly. And if it is, then I
Yep.
mean, whoever wins this game obviously deserves to be in the Super Bowl. But if they're able to blow out this defense, then I think they absolutely have earned their spot, despite all the comments about their schedule this season.
Yep. All right, now the NFC Championship. Rams versus Seahawks. Who do you got?
I've been going with the Rams since wild card weekend, and I'm going to stick to my guns here. I'm going to say the Rams are going to win. I think, obviously you mentioned earlier Zach Charbonnet is out for the rest of the season and probably even into next season. And I think, obviously they looked great against the 49ers, that diminished defense last week. I think this Rams defense is better suited to stop the run, and it's obviously, going to be depleted now without Charbonnet. And the Rams have made the big plays when it matters. That's sort of been the theme of my arguments today, is they're making the plays when it matters. Rams were able to get the win 2 weeks ago because they got that game-winning drive. And then last week, the defense got that big pick. Offense went right back down the field to get that field goal. And, it's going to be a very close game, and probably another high-scoring game. But at the end of the day, I do trust Matthew Stafford and that offense a little bit more against this really good defense. So I'm going to say the Rams win 31-28.
Okay. I agree. I'm going to go with the Rams in this one because I think with the Seahawks, obviously Sam Darnold played pretty decently last week. Didn't have a lot of yards, but to be fair, he didn't really need to be the hero. He didn't really have to do much because they were able to run the ball so well and the defense really took over. But I think this week is going to present a way different challenge because the Rams are healthier, their offense is more dynamic, and the defense has proven to give Sam Darnold some of his worst performances. Now, I understand Darnold was able to beat them last, a few weeks back or a month ago, able to come back from that 30-14 deficit. But I feel like the Rams now, they're going to come in with a better focus, with a better drive. We all know what that defense could do to Sam Darnold. But the question is, how much longer can Seattle's defense, hold up against Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams coming back from that hamstring injury, and
Right.
Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, establishes themselves as a dynamic 1-2 punch. And with that offensive line, I think Seattle's defense can be good, but if they're on the field for too long, I feel like it's just going to be the type of game where they can only do but so much. So I think the Rams are going to win by a little bit of a bigger spread. I'll say they win 31-21.
Yeah, and then we get the battle of the MVPs in the Super Bowl.
Yep, absolutely. That's and hey, Patriots versus Rams part 3. So 2001, 2018, 2025, and New England is 2-0.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure you
hopefully
like your
3-0.
odds.
Oh my gosh. Again, it's just too good to be true. But that just about does it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. We will be back with another episode next week, just before we gotta head out to Santa Clara. But we hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. We hope you enjoy these games, and yeah, we'll see you next time. So long.